I overheard my daughter-in-law whisper to her mother in my kitchen, "A few more months and this will all be ours." They didn't know I was standing right there. I stayed silent, smiled, and the next morning I made one phone call. When they showed up for their usual free dinner, they found the locks changed and a letter that made them both drop to their knees. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. The sound of the water running in the sink was loud in my ear. I had turned to come back into the kitchen for the dessert plates. The hallway was dark, and the rectangle of light from the kitchen doorway was bright. That's when I heard it. Not the words at first, but the tone. A low, conspiratorial murmur that was not meant for me. I stopped moving. My hand, which had been reaching to push the door wider, froze on the wall. The murmur clarified into my daughter-in-law Chloe's voice, sharp and clear. "It's just a matter of time, Mom. All of this," she said, and I could picture her making a small, dismissive gesture. "Will be ours, you'll see." There was a soft chuckle from Patricia, her mother. "The old girl doesn't have a clue. She just putters in that garden. Marcus says she's happy." "Happy to be used," Chloe corrected, her voice dropping to that whisper again, the one that sliced through the warm air of my own home. "We'll be gentle, of course. Ease her into a nice facility. Once we control the finances and the house is in our names, we can do what we want. This neighborhood is appreciating. We could sell and build something modern. No more of this old lady clutter." My breath stopped in my chest. A coldness, distinct and metallic, spread from my core out to my fingers and toes. The words old girl and facility and our names bounced around my skull. I stood in the dark, the scent of my roasted chicken and the apple pie I had baked from scratch still hanging in the air. I had spent the afternoon preparing this meal for them. My feet moved before my mind could instruct them to. I took a step back, silent on the runner in the hall. Then I turned and walked with deliberate calm to the downstairs bathroom. I closed the door. I did not lock it. I looked at my face in the mirror. Bernice Williams, 62 years old, gray streaking through my hair that I used to think was elegant. My eyes looked back at me, wide and dark. I saw the woman they saw, the old girl, the puttering grandmother, the obstacle. I turned on the cold water. I splashed it on my face. The shock was physical, a counter to the ice already inside. I dried my face with a towel, pressing the clean cotton against my skin. I had to go back out there. My son, Marcus, was in the living room, probably scrolling on his phone. The two of them were in my kitchen, plotting the end of my life here while I washed their dishes. I opened the bathroom door. The hallway was still dark. I walked toward the kitchen light. I made my steps audible, a normal tread. I hummed a little, a tuneless fragment of a song. When I pushed through the door, they were apart. Patricia was drying a platter. Chloe was wiping the already clean counter. They both looked up, their faces arranged into pleasant, empty smiles. "There you are, Bernie," Patricia said. "We were just finishing up. Everything was delicious." "Thank you, Pat," I said. My voice emerged normally. It was a marvel. "I just needed a moment. Let me get that pie." I moved past them to the refrigerator. I took out the pie, the whipped cream. I set them on the counter. My hands were steady. I picked up the knife and began to cut neat, even slices. I was aware of them watching me. I felt like a specimen under glass. "Marcus," I called, my voice carrying to the living room. "Dessert is ready." We gathered at the dining table, the one my husband, Charles, and I had bought 30 years ago. The four of us sat in our usual seats. I served the pie. I passed the cream. The conversation was banal. Patricia complimented the flakiness of the crust. Marcus talked about a project at work. Chloe nodded along, her hand resting on my son's arm. I watched them. I saw it all now. The way Chloe's eyes would flick around the room, not with appreciation, but with assessment. I remembered her comments over the past year. "This room gets such great light, it would be perfect for a home office. The yard is huge, but it must be a lot for you to manage, Bernie. Have you ever thought about downsizing? There are lovely assisted living communities now, more like resorts." I had heard concern. I had heard casual conversation. Now I heard the blueprint of a coup. I ate a bite of pie. The apples, which I had seasoned with cinnamon and a touch of nutmeg, tasted like dust. I swallowed. I asked Marcus about his college friend, the one who was moving back to town. I listened to his answer. I smiled when Chloe made a light joke. Inside, I was mapping the structure of my own betrayal. The trust I had placed, not just in Chloe, but in my own son for bringing this woman into our lives. The generosity I had shown, letting them stay here for months when they were between houses, cooking for them, caring for them. It had all been entered into a ledger I did not know existed, and it was being tallied as a debt of my own naivete. The evening ended. There were hugs at the door. Chloe's perfume, something expensive and floral, enveloped me as she leaned in. "Thanks for everything, Bernie. You're too good to us." I smiled. "My pleasure, dear. Drive safe." I closed the door. I turned the deadbolt with a solid, familiar click. I leaned my back against the cool wood. I listened to the sound of their car starting, the tires crunching on the driveway gravel, the engine noise fatting down the street. Then, and only then, did I let my body slide down to the floor. The silence of the house pressed in on me, a heavy, absolute thing. The clean kitchen, the lingering scent of pie and coffee, the warm lamplight, it was all a stage set. A beautiful, hollow set for a play where I was the mark. I sat on the polished hardwood for a long time. The cold from the floor seeped through my slacks. I did not cry. The shock was too complete for tears. It had been replaced by a vast, ringing emptiness. Then, slowly, from the edges of that emptiness, a new sensation began to gather. It was not hot rage. It was a cold, dense, and terribly clear understanding. They had seen a kindly old woman. They had seen a soft target. They had made a critical error. They had whispered their plans in the heart of my home, and I had heard them. The game was not over. It had just for the first time begun. I pushed myself up from the floor. My knees ached. I walked through the silent rooms, turning off lights. I did not go to bed. I went to my study. I sat in Charles's old leather chair. I looked out at the dark shape of my garden. I waited for the dawn. There was work to do. The first gray light of dawn found me still in the chair. I had not slept. The empty teacup on the desk had grown cold hours ago. My body was stiff, but my mind was moving with a sharp, relentless clarity it had not possessed in years. The emotional storm had passed, leaving a flat, operational landscape. I was no longer a betrayed mother-in-law. I was a commander assessing a breach in her defenses. I stood up, my joints protesting. I walked to the filing cabinet in the corner, a sturdy metal thing Charles had bought for our household documents. I pulled out the drawer labeled legal and financial. The folders were neat, in chronological order. My hands found the one labeled Estate Charles Williams. I carried it back to the desk. Inside were the papers that defined the architecture of my life after his passing, the deed to the house. The title was in my name only. Charles had insisted on that, a fact I had always viewed as a morbid formality but now recognized as his first and last gift of protection. The will. I read it again. It left everything to me, with Marcus as the secondary beneficiary. There was no mention of Chloe. This was my fortress, and the walls were made of paper and law. I set those documents aside. I began to lay out others: the property tax bills, the insurance policies, the records of the mortgage we had paid off 10 years early. Each paper was a thread in the tapestry of the life I had built here. They had looked at this tapestry and seen only a value to be appraised and claimed. With the legal foundation established, I allowed myself to review the human evidence. I opened the photo album on the lower shelf. There was Marcus's graduation, our family Christmas the year before Charles died. And there, entering the frame more recently, was Chloe. I studied the pictures not with nostalgia, but with forensic detachment. I saw the gradual change. The early photos showed a woman making an effort, her smile tentative but present. The later ones showed a different posture. She was often slightly turned away from me, her arm possessively through Marcus's, her gaze already looking beyond the moment, toward something she considered hers. I closed the album. The memories were no longer just memories, they were data points. The time she had borrowed my mother's pearl necklace for a wedding, and then, when I gently asked for it back months later, claimed it must have been misplaced in their move. The increasing frequency of her mother Patricia's visits, each one longer, each one marked by compliments about my home that felt less like admiration and more like an inventory. "Such solid original flooring," Patricia had said just last month, her heel tapping on the oak. "Must be worth a fortune to restore." I had heard a compliment. Now I heard a surveyor's note. The sun was fully up now, casting long rectangles of light across the desk. The house was utterly silent. This was my domain. Every book on the shelf, every piece of furniture we had saved for, every plant in the garden I had nurtured from a cutting. It was all an extension of my life and my marriage. It was not a portfolio for their future. I needed a plan. Revenge, as an abstract concept, was useless to me. I required action. Legal, precise, irrevocable action. I needed to transform my cold understanding into a sequence of steps. My eyes returned to the estate folder. Tucked behind the last copy of the will was a small, cream-colored business card, its edges slightly worn. Jonathan Rhodes-esque, estate planning and probate. Charles's lawyer. A sharp, unsentimental man who had handled our wills. I had not spoken to him since Charles's funeral, where he had pressed this card into my hand and said, "If you ever have any questions, Bernice, do not hesitate. Your husband was very clear in his wishes." At the time, I thought he was referring to grief. Now I understood Charles had been clear about more than just asset distribution. He had been clear about the nature of people. I picked up the card. The paper was thick, substantial. This was not a decision made in rage. It was a logistical next step. I needed expert consultation on my defensive position. I needed to know the full extent of my power. I made a fresh pot of tea. While it steeped, I took a notepad and a pen. At the top of the page, I wrote, "Facts." I listed what I had heard, word for word as I remembered them. I noted the date, the time, the witnesses present. I wrote down the legal documents I possessed. I noted the pattern of behavior, the extended stays, the comments about the house, the missing necklace. I then wrote a second heading, "Questions for Rhodes." Can they contest the will? What constitutes undue influence? What legal steps can I take now to secure my property? What are my rights if they are currently guests in my home? The tea was ready. I poured a cup and sat back down. The list of questions was calm, rational. There was no mention of hurt feelings or betrayal. It was a blueprint for a counter-operation. I looked at the clock on the desk. It was 8:07 a.m. Law offices opened at 9. I would wait. I spent the next hour reviewing every financial statement, every utility bill in my name alone. I was auditing my own life, and I found it to be in good order, solvent, secure, independent. At 9:05 a.m., I picked up my phone. I dialed the number on the card. A receptionist answered with the firm's name. My voice, when I spoke, surprised me with its steadiness. "This is Bernice Williams. I need to schedule an appointment with Mr. Jonathan Rhodes as soon as possible. It pertains to my estate and some concerning developments within my family." The receptionist offered me a time tomorrow at 10 in the morning. I accepted. I wrote the appointment in my calendar. The act of writing it down made it real. It was the first concrete move. I hung up the phone. The plan was no longer a vague intention. It had an appointment time. It had a legal representative. The woman who had crumpled on the floor last night was gone. In her place was someone else. Someone who had examined the blueprint of her own betrayal and was now quietly, methodically, drafting the plans for its demolition. The steel beneath the smile had begun to temper. The offices of Rhodes and Associates were in a quiet, brick building downtown. I arrived 10 minutes early. I wore a simple navy dress and carried my documents in a structured leather folder. The waiting area was calm, with thick carpet and framed legal degrees on the wall. I gave my name to the receptionist. I did not fidget. I sat with my hands folded over the folder in my lap. At exactly 10 o'clock, a door opened and Jonathan Rhodes appeared. He was older now, more gray in his hair, but his eyes were the same, quick and assessing. "Mrs. Williams," he said, extending a hand. "It's good to see you. Please come in." His office was as I remembered, orderly, lined with books, a large window overlooking a small courtyard. He gestured to a chair opposite his wide, polished desk. I sat, placing the folder before me. "Thank you for seeing me on short notice, Mr. Rhodes." "Of course, you said it pertained to your estate and family developments." He laced his fingers together on the desk. "How can I help?" I opened my folder. I took out the top sheet, my list of facts. I did not speak from emotion. I spoke as if giving a report. 3 nights ago, in my kitchen, I overheard a conversation between my daughter-in-law, Chloe Richardson Williams, and her mother, Patricia Richardson. I looked down at my notes, though I had memorized the words. Chloe stated, and I quote, "It's just a matter of time. All of this will be ours." She referred to easing me into a facility and taking control of my finances and my home. Patricia Richardson agreed. They discussed selling the house as it was too cluttered and outdated for their tastes. I looked up. Rhodes's expression had not changed, but his gaze was fixed on me intently. I slid the paper across the desk to him. He picked it up and read it silently. My son Marcus was present in the house but not in the room, I continued. I believe him to be unaware of this specific conversation, but his general inattention has allowed this climate to develop. I have since reviewed my documents. I took out the deed and a copy of the will. The house is in my name alone. The will leaves everything to me, then to Marcus. Chloe is not mentioned. I have no joint accounts with them. My finances are separate. Rhodes set down my fact sheet and took the documents. He reviewed them briefly, a formality. He already knew their contents. "These are your copies," he said, tapping the deed and will. "The originals are on file here. Nothing has changed. Your position from a legal standpoint is extremely strong, Bernice. May I call you Bernice?" "You may." "The house is your separate property. The will is unambiguous. What they are discussing, attempting to gain control through coercion or a claim of undue influence, would be an uphill battle for them, provided you are of sound mind." He gave me a direct look. "Which you clearly are." "What do I need to do?" I asked. My voice was flat. "I want to secure my position. Then I want to remove them from my life. I want it to be clean, legal, and final." Rhodes leaned back in his chair. "We proceed in 2 phases. First, we fortify. We ensure there are no vulnerabilities. Second, we execute a disengagement that leaves no room for legal recourse against you." "Explain the fortification." "We update your will. Not the beneficiaries, but we add a specific, unambiguous clause stating that any person who challenges the will or is found to have exerted undue influence forfeits any claim. We create a new healthcare directive and power of attorney, nomming a neutral third party, a trusted friend, perhaps, or a professional fiduciary, not your son. We document everything. The conversation you overheard, write it down in a dated journal. Note any past incidents that support a pattern of entitlement or pressure. Do you have any of their belongings in your home?" "A few things of Chloe. Some toiletries, a sweater, a yoga mat." "Gather them, box them. Changing the locks is also a prudent physical step, establishing clear boundaries. Do you have a security system?" "I do." "Ensure it is active. These are all defensive, precautionary measures. They send no signal yet." "And the execution?" I asked. "That depends on your goal. You could simply cease contact. But given what you heard, a clean break may require a catalyst. You have the evidence of their intent. A confrontation on your terms, where you present their plan back to them and state your terms for disengagement, can be effective. It turns their conspiracy into an acknowledged fact. It shames them. And if done with witnesses, or in a manner that is documented, it protects you from future false claims of hostility or instability on your part." "I want them to know I heard them," I said. The words came out quietly. "I want them to know their plan failed because they underestimated me. I want it to be over in one action." Rhodes nodded slowly. "Then we craft a communication. A letter delivered in a way that they must receive it simultaneously, perhaps at your home. It states what you heard, the legal steps you have taken to secure your assets, and that their presence in your life is permanently revoked. It is not an emotional outburst. It is a notice of termination. You then physically secure the property against them." "And my son?" "That," Rhodes said, his tone softening slightly, "is the more complex variable. The letter can be addressed to all 3. His inclusion is a consequence of his complicity through neglect. It may be the shock he needs. You can choose, after the fact, to open a channel to him alone under strict conditions. But in the moment of severance, he must be grouped with them for the strategy to work." I considered this. It was the hardest part. But Marcus had sat at my table while the plot unfolded around him. He had heard nothing, seen nothing. That was a choice. "I understand," I said. We will draft the letter together. I will review it to ensure it is legally sound. A cease and desist from any further contact regarding your assets or person. We will also prepare the updated documents. Once you execute the new will and directives, your fortress will be legally impenetrable. He took a legal pad and began making notes. Schedule the locksmith, box their items, keep your journal, return here in 2 days to sign the new documents. After that, you choose the moment. A feeling of concrete resolve settled in my chest. The path was no longer theoretical. It had steps, costs, and a predictable end. "What is the cost for your services?" I asked. He quoted a figure. It was substantial, but it was the price of my freedom. I nodded. "I will write a check before I leave." "Bernice," he said, setting his pen down, "what they did was vile. The law can protect your assets, but it cannot heal the personal betrayal. What you are planning is a surgical removal. It will be painful, but it is the correct course." "I am not interested in healing yet," I said, gathering my papers back into the folder. "I am interested in security. Healing can come later in a house that is truly mine again." I wrote the check with a steady hand. I scheduled my next appointment. I walked out of the cool, quiet office into the midday sun. The world outside looked the same, but I was different. I had a plan. I had an ally. I had the law on my side. The old woman who puttered in her garden was now a client with a strategy. I got into my car and drove home, already mentally composing the first lines of the letter that would change everything. The Sunday after my meeting with Rhodes arrived with the regularity of a tide. It was our standing arrangement, dinner at my house. Normally, I looked forward to it. Today, it was a field exercise. I moved through my kitchen with a detached efficiency. I prepared the pot roast, the carrots and potatoes, the yeast rolls from frozen dough, the menu of a generous, unassuming mother. Every action was deliberate. I was not cooking for family. I was setting a stage. At 4 o'clock, I heard the car pull into the driveway. I took a final look around. The house was clean, warm, inviting. A perfect replica of the home they thought they were inheriting. I smoothed my apron and opened the door before they could knock. "Bernie, something smells amazing," Chloe said, leaning in for the usual cheek kiss. Her perfume was the same as the other night. I accepted the kiss, my face a placid mask. Come in, come in. Marcus, help your mother with her coat." Patricia was already stepping inside, her eyes doing their habitual sweep of the foyer. I saw her glance at the small antique mirror Charles had bought me, her gaze lingering a fraction too long. "The garden looks wonderful, Bernie," Patricia said, handing Marcus her coat. "Even in this light, such mature plantings." "Thank you, Pat. They've had years to settle in." I led them to the living room. "Drinks. I have iced tea or wine." We settled into the familiar ritual. Marcus got the wine. Chloe complimented a new throw pillow. Patricia asked after a neighbor she'd met once. I answered everything with calm, superficial ease. Inside, I was cataloging. I watched Chloe's eyes as she looked at the built-in bookshelves. It was not the gaze of someone appreciating literature. It was an assessment of square footage, of potential for display. When Patricia asked, "Has the furnace been giving you any trouble this winter? These old systems can be costly." I heard the probe about repair expenses and equity depletion. "It runs perfectly," I said, smiling. "Charles had it meticulously maintained. Some things, when cared for, last a lifetime." The conversation at dinner was a master class in subtext. I steered it, asking bland questions to draw them out. "How's the planning for your kitchen remodel coming, Chloe?" I asked, passing the butter. Her face lit up with a self-satisfied glow. "Oh, we've finalized the designs. It's going to be completely open concept, very modern. We're just waiting for the right time to get started." She glanced at Marcus, then back at me. "It's important to update, to suit how you really live." "I suppose it is," I said. "I've always found this layout suits me just fine." Patricia chimed in. "Oh, Bernie, but think of the resale value. An updated kitchen is a huge selling point. Not that you're selling," she laughed, a tinkling sound. "But it's always good to think of the future, for Marcus's sake." Marcus, chewing his pot roast, nodded absently. "Mom's kitchen is great, always has been." I saw the faint tightening at the corner of Chloe's mouth. Her husband's lack of alignment was a minor irritant in her plan. Well, I said gently, a home should reflect the person who lives in it. That's the most important thing. After dessert, we moved back to the living room. This was when the most telling exchanges often happened. Fatigue lowered their guards. Chloe sat close to Marcus on the sofa, her hand on his knee. Patricia took the armchair nearest the fireplace, which happened to be Charles's old chair. You know, Bernie, Patricia began, sipping her coffee, Chloe and I were talking about community resources. There's a wonderful new senior center that just opened over on Maple. They have day programs, lectures, even transportation. It's more like a social club, really. We picked up a brochure. She reached into her large handbag and produced a glossy trifold pamphlet. She held it out to me. I took it. The cover showed smiling silver-haired people doing pottery. How thoughtful of you to think of me, I said, my voice even. I did not open it. I placed it on the side table. It looks lovely. I'll keep it in mind, though my calendar seems quite full with my book club and the Garden Society. Of course, Patricia said, but her smile didn't waver. Just something to consider. As we get older, it's smart to have options, to not be a burden. The word hung in the air. Burden asterisk. It was the first time one of them had said it aloud in front of me. I couldn't agree more, I said, meeting her eyes. Independence is everything. I've structured my life to maintain it. Charles and I were very deliberate. An hour later, they gathered to leave. There were the usual hugs, the thanks for the meal. At the door, Chloe paused. Oh, Bernie, I think I left a lightweight sweater here last week. A blue cashmere blend. I'll just pop upstairs and grab it. A test, a small claim of territory. Don't trouble yourself, dear, I said, my hand on the doorframe. I'll find it and set it aside for you. It's no trouble at all. For a second, her polished composure flickered. She was not used to being denied access, however politely. Oh, okay, thank you. I closed the door. I locked it. I did not move from the spot until I heard their car drive away. Then I walked to the living room. I picked up the senior center brochure. I carried it to the kitchen, tore it neatly in half, and dropped it into the recycling bin. I cleared the dessert plates. I washed the wine glasses. The performance was over. The data was collected. Every comment about updates, about resale value, about burdens and options, had confirmed the blueprint I'd heard in the whisper. They were not just plotting. They were already acting in small, incremental ways to frame my life as a problem they were preparing to solve. I felt no new anger, only a solidified certainty. My resolve, which had been a theory in a lawyer's office, was now hardened steel. They saw a woman to be managed and moved. I was now a woman with a plan, watching them walk blindly toward its trigger. The next dinner would not be business as usual. It would be the last. The morning after the Sunday dinner, I did not putter. I executed. The first task was reclamation. I took a small cardboard box from the garage and went upstairs to the guest room Chloe sometimes used. The room was neat, impersonal. In the closet, I found the blue cashmere sweater. I folded it and placed it in the box. From the bathroom, I gathered a half-used bottle of expensive moisturizer, a hairbrush with a few strands of blonde hair caught in the bristles, a lipstick. From a drawer, a forgotten yoga mat still in its strap. I walked through the rest of the house, my eyes sharp for any trace of her claim. A novel she'd been reading on the living room side table. A phone charger left plugged in by the sofa. Each item went into the box. It was not a large collection. It was the scattered evidence of a gradual, presumptuous occupation. I sealed the box with packing tape. I wrote Chloe on the side in black marker. I placed it by the front door. The next task was security. I had scheduled the locksmith for 10 a.m. He arrived on time, a quiet man in a uniform with a company logo. I showed him the front door, the back door, the door from the garage. You want all these rekeyed? He asked, his toolkit already open. I want all the locks replaced entirely, I said. New hardware, new keys, the highest grade you carry. He nodded, a professional acknowledging a serious request. He got to work. The sound of his tools was loud in the quiet house, the thunk of the old deadbolt being removed, the squeak of screws being driven into new, heavier metal. Each sound was a concrete step toward a new reality, I watched him fit the new key into the front door lock. He turned it. The mechanism engaged with a solid, satisfying click asterisk, a sound of finality. He handed me 3 sets of shiny new keys. They felt heavy in my palm. "All done," he said. "These are the only keys, don't lose them." "I won't," I said. I paid him in cash. I locked the door behind him, testing the new key myself. The bolt slid smoothly, firmly into place. My home's perimeter was now secure. The physical act was a powerful counterpoint to the psychological violation. They could no longer just walk in. The assumption of access was over. With the space secured, I moved to the heart of the operation, the letter. I sat at my desk in the study. I opened my laptop. I opened a new document. At the top, I centered the date. Then I began to type. To Marcus, Chloe, and Patricia asterisk. This letter serves as formal notice of the permanent termination of our relationship and your access to my person and property. I did not write dear. There was nothing dear here. My fingers were steady on the keys. On the evening of October 12th, while in my kitchen, I overheard a conversation between Chloe Richardson Williams and Patricia Richardson. In that conversation, Chloe stated, "It's just a matter of time. All of this will be ours." She elaborated on a plan to ease me into a nice facility and take control of my finances and my home with the intention of selling it. Patricia Richardson agreed with and encouraged this plan. This was not an isolated sentiment. It represents the culmination of a pattern of behavior, including repeated comments about the value and potential of my property, unsolicited suggestions regarding my living situation, and a general attitude of entitlement to assets I have built over a lifetime. I listed the facts just as I had for Rhodes. I described the senior center brochure. I mentioned the inquiries about home systems and remodels. I presented it not as a complaint, but as evidence. In response, I have taken the following legal and practical steps. 1. I have updated my will and estate plan with my attorney, Jonathan Rhodes, Esquire, to include specific provisions against any challenge or claim of undue influence. Asterisk 2. I have executed new healthcare and financial powers of attorney, nomming a neutral third party. Asterisk 3. As of today, all locks on my home have been changed. Your keys no longer function. Asterisk 4. Any personal items belonging to Chloe have been boxed and are available for pickup, as arranged below. I paused. This was the core of it. My kindness was not a weakness. This house is a home I built with my husband, not a prize for you to plot over. Your actions have demonstrated a profound betrayal of trust and familial bonds. Consequently, you are no longer welcome in my life. Do not call, do not visit, do not contact me by any means. Any attempt to do so will be considered harassment and will be handled through legal channels. A copy of this letter is on file with my attorney. For the purpose of retrieving the box of personal items, you may come to the property on Thursday at 4:00 p.m. The box will be on the front porch. Do not approach the door. Do not ring the bell. This is the only interaction that will be permitted. Bernice Williams asterisk. I read it through twice. It was cold. It was clear. It was a legal and emotional eviction notice. It contained no pleas, no accusations of hurt feelings. It stated facts, outlined consequences, and established a new, unassailable boundary. It was perfect. I printed 3 copies on heavy, cream-colored paper. The sound of the printer humming, the pages sliding out, made it official. I signed each one with my formal signature, the one I used on checks and legal documents. Bernice Williams. I took 3 plain white business envelopes. I addressed each one by hand, one to Marcus, one to Chloe, one to Patricia. I folded the letters, inserted them, and sealed the envelopes. I did not lick the glue. I used a damp sponge. It felt cleaner. I placed the 3 envelopes in a row on my desk. Next to them, I set the heavy new keys to my house. The visual was stark, the papers that ended our relationship and the tools that secured my future without them. The preparation was complete. The infrastructure of my old life, the open door, the shared meals, the assumed welcome had been dismantled. In its place was a fortified, silent space and a set of instructions for their permanent removal. All that remained was to deliver the message. I looked at the envelopes. Thursday at 4. The final bite. The 3 envelopes lay on my desk like indictments. I sat back in the chair, my hands resting on the arms. The work was done. The machinery of my response was built and primed. In the quiet that followed, my mind did not race forward to Thursday. It slid backward. It went to the beginning, to the source of the fracture. I needed to understand the path, not with grief, but with the clarity of an autopsy. How had the woman who baked pies for family dinners become the woman writing letters of permanent exile? It started with Marcus bringing her home for a barbecue. It was a summer afternoon 5 years ago. The table was set in the backyard. Chloe arrived wearing a crisp white sundress, her hand clasped in Marcus's. She was pretty, polished. Her smile was bright. "Mom, this is Chloe," Marcus said, his face full of a hope that made my heart ache even now. "Welcome, Chloe," I said, embracing her. She was stiff for a second, then patted my back. "Everything smells amazing, Mrs. Williams." "Please call me Bernie." I remember her walking around the yard, commenting on the hydrangeas. "Such vibrant color, you must have perfect soil." It felt like a compliment then. Now I wonder if it was her first assessment of the asset's condition. She was charming that day. She helped carry plates. She laughed at my husband Charles's old jokes. When she spoke of her job in marketing, she was ambitious but careful, framing her drive as admirable ambition. I wanted to like her. For Marcus, I truly did. The holidays came. She joined us for Thanksgiving. That was when her mother, Patricia, entered the picture more permanently. Chloe called a few days before. "Mom is alone this year. Would it be a terrible imposition if she joined us? She's just so eager to meet you all." What could I say? No, I extended the invitation. Patricia arrived with a bottle of wine and a scrutinizing gaze. She was friendly in a forceful way. She praised my china. She asked detailed questions about the house, when it was built, the square footage, the school district. At the time, I thought it was just conversation, a mother's interest in where her daughter might settle. "You've done so well for yourself, Bernie," Patricia said over pie. "A home like this all paid off. That's security. So many people our age are struggling." It felt odd, but I shrugged it off as generational small talk. The engagement came a year later. I gave them my mother's pearl necklace to wear for the wedding photos. "Something old," I said. "She would have been so happy to see Marcus so happy." Chloe's eyes had lit up with a genuine-looking tears. "Oh, Bernie, it's beautiful. I'll treasure it." After the wedding, they moved into an apartment. Chloe's visits became strategic. She'd come over for coffee and walk through the house. "I just love this archway," she'd say. Or, "This sunroom is wonderful, but imagine it with larger windows." It was always framed as admiration. I began to feel like a museum curator giving a tour to a prospective buyer. Then, 2 years ago, their apartment building had a flood. They needed a place to stay for 6 to 8 weeks during repairs. "Of course," I said. "Stay here." It was the natural thing to do. Those weeks were the turning point. Chloe and Patricia, who was now a frequent helper, treated my home not as a temporary refuge, but as a proving ground. Patricia would reorganize my kitchen cabinets to be more efficient. Chloe would talk about paint colors and opening up walls as if brainstorming for a project. I would come home from my book club to find furniture slightly moved, a new throw pillow on the sofa that Patricia had just picked up because it matched. I spoke to Marcus. "Son, they're being a bit enthusiastic. This is still my house." He'd wave a hand, distracted. "They're just trying to help, Mom. Chloe's really into decor. Don't take it personally." I let it go. I told myself I was being overly sensitive, protective of the space Charles and I had made. I was the accommodating mother-in-law, the peacekeeper. The necklace was the quietest theft. 6 months after the wedding, I mentioned it. "I'd love to see a photo from the wedding with the pearls on," I said one day. Chloe's smile didn't falter. "Oh, of course, I have some gorgeous ones. I should get them printed for you." The subject drifted away. A few months later, I asked gently, "I was thinking of wearing your grandmother's pearls to the symphony. Do you still have them at your place?" A faint cloud passed over her face. I think they might have gotten mixed in with some of my costume jewelry during the move after the flood. I've been meaning to sort through that box. I'll find them, I promise. She never did. I never saw them again. When I brought it up a third time, her tone shifted to slight annoyance. Bernie, I'm sure they're safe. It's just a necklace. Things get misplaced. That was the moment the first crack appeared in my trust. It wasn't about the pearls, though they held sentimental value. It was about the dismissal. My history, my sentiment, was just a necklace. An inconvenience to her narrative. They moved into their new house, but the annexation of my life continued. The weekly dinners became obligatory, not joyful. The comments about my future, my house, my supposed burdens became more frequent, always veiled in concern. Patricia's presence was a constant. I had welcomed them, and they had slowly, politely, begun to measure the curtains for their own windows. Sitting at the desk, the memory of that welcome, the open door, the extra plate at the table, the loaned necklace, was like looking at a map of my own naivete. Each kindness had been a brick they used to build a path to my front door, not as guests, but as claimants. The love I had for my son had blinded me to the calculation in their eyes. I opened a drawer and took out a single photograph. It was from that first barbecue. Marcus had his arm around me, grinning. Chloe stood slightly apart, smiling at the camera. The sun was bright. We all looked happy. It was a picture of a beginning that contained the seed of this end. I placed the photograph face down on the desk. The sentimental journey was over. The flashback had served its purpose. It confirmed that my current course was not an overreaction, but a long overdue correction. The woman in that photo, the hopeful mother, was gone. The woman at the desk, with the letters and the new keys, was what remained, and she was ready. I prepared the Wednesday evening meal with the same deliberate care as I had for Sunday. Roasted chicken, rosemary potatoes, green beans almondine. A simple, satisfying menu. The table was set with the everyday dishes. Nothing signaled a special occasion. To them, it was just another midweek visit. To me, it was the final calibration before detonation. They arrived at 6:30. Marcus came in first, giving me a distracted peck on the cheek. "Smells good, Mom." Chloe followed, carrying a bakery box. "I brought dessert. No need for you to trouble yourself." She placed it on the counter, her eyes scanning the kitchen as if checking for any sign of deterioration since Sunday. Patricia was last, as usual. "Bernie, you look tired. Long day." Her concern was a blade wrapped in silk. "I'm quite well, thank you," I said, taking the wine Marcus offered. "Dinner is ready, let's sit." The conversation during the meal was a shallow stream. Marcus talked about work. Patricia shared gossip about a distant cousin. Chloe was quieter than usual, but her eyes were active, moving from the crown molding to the built-in cabinet that housed my good china. I served the chicken. I passed the potatoes. I asked polite questions. I was a perfect, serene hostess. Inside, I was a clock counting down. It was during dessert, the store-bought fruit tart Chloe had brought, that she made her move. The conversation had lulled. Marcus was scrolling through his phone under the table. Patricia was sipping her coffee. Chloe cleared her throat softly. Bernie, Marcus, and I were talking last night." She placed her fork neatly on her plate. "About the future." I looked at her, my expression politely interested. "Oh. Yes, we're so busy with our own careers, and you're here all alone in this big house. The upkeep must be getting to be a lot." She leaned forward slightly. "We want you to know we're thinking about you, really thinking, about how to ease your burdens." The phrase from the whisper echoed in the silent kitchen of my memory. Ease her into a nice facility. "That's very considerate," I said, my voice mild. I took a sip of water. "We've even started looking at some options," Patricia chimed in, her tone conspiratorial. "Lovely places. One has a putting green. You'd have so much more freedom, Bernie. No more worrying about a leaky roof or a faulty appliance." Marcus finally looked up from his phone, a faint line between his brows. "What options? We talked about maybe helping Mom with a handyman service." Chloe shot him a look that was both irritated and dismissive. "A service is a temporary fix, Marcus. We're talking about long-term security and peace of mind, for everyone." She turned her bright, empty smile back to me. "We could even manage the sale of the house for you, handle all the stress. You wouldn't have to lift a finger." They were no longer whispering by the sink. They were presenting their business proposal at the dining table, with the confidence of people who believe their target is already defeated. I set my water glass down. I looked at each of them, Patricia's eager, avaricious gaze, Chloe's smug certainty, Marcus's confused discomfort. The air in the room felt thick, charged, but only I could feel the current. "How kind of you to have put so much thought into my life," I said. My tone was flat, devoid of the gratitude they expected. I picked up the dish of potatoes. "Would anyone care for more?" There was a beat of stunned silence. My response was so utterly off their script. Chloe blinked. Patricia's smile tightened. Marcus looked from his wife to me, his confusion deepening. "No, all right then." I stood and began to gather the dessert plates. "I'll clear these." I carried the plates to the kitchen. Behind me, I heard a low, hurried whisper between Chloe and Patricia. I could not make out the words, but the tone was sharp, frustrated. I turned on the water at the sink. The sound drowned them out. The rest of the visit was short and strained. My calm refusal to engage with their plan had thrown them off balance. Their goodbyes were stiff. Chloe's hug was a brief, rigid press. "We'll talk soon, Bernie," she said, her voice firm. "Good night, Chloe," I said. I closed the door. I engaged the new deadbolt with a definitive turn. I did not move to the window to watch them leave. I already knew what they looked like walking away. I walked to the study. On the desk, the 3 envelopes waited. I picked them up. I had planned to tape them to the door tomorrow before they arrived for the box pickup. But their performance tonight, the brazen, entitled unveiling of their plot, confirmed everything. There was no doubt left, no room for second guessing. I took a roll of clear packing tape from the drawer. I slid the envelopes into the inside pocket of my lightweight jacket hanging by the back door. I would attach them in the morning, before the sun was fully up. The letter was the final word. Their words tonight were just the last, confirming evidence entered into the record. I turned off the lights and went upstairs. The house was silent, secure, and full of the ghosts of their final, foolish overreach. They had shown me their hand, thinking I was too old or too kind to know how to play mine. Tomorrow they would learn the cost of that mistake. I slept a deep, untroubled sleep. The waiting was over. I awoke before dawn. The house was cool and silent. I dressed in comfortable clothes and went downstairs. I took the box labeled Chloe from beside the front door and carried it out to the porch, placing it squarely in the center. Then I took the 3 envelopes from my jacket pocket. Using the clear packing tape, I fixed them side by side to the front door at eye level. They were perfectly aligned. The white rectangles against the dark wood were stark and unmistakable. I went back inside. I engaged the new deadbolt. I walked upstairs to the spare bedroom that overlooked the front yard. I positioned a chair slightly back from the window, leaving the curtains parted just enough. And then I waited. Their car pulled into the driveway at exactly 4 o'clock. They were always punctual when they wanted something. All 3 of them got out. Chloe led the way, her steps quick and expectant. She was probably anticipating a brief, awkward exchange, the retrieval of her box, another small erosion of my space. Patricia followed, her purse clutched tightly. Marcus trailed behind, looking at his phone. Chloe mounted the porch steps first. She reached for the doorknob automatically, her other hand already digging in her purse for her old key. I saw her fingers pause on the knob. She looked down. She tried to turn it. It didn't move. A faint frown appeared. She inserted her key into the deadbolt. It refused to turn. She jiggled it. Nothing. "What's wrong?" Patricia asked, coming up behind her. "The key isn't working." Marcus joined them, putting his phone away. "Let me try mine." He took out his key ring, selected the familiar one, and tried. The same result. The lock would not accept it. It was then that Chloe's eyes, scanning the door in frustration, landed on the box at her feet. Then they lifted to the 3 white envelopes taped to the wood. Her name was on the center one. She reached out and peeled her envelope free. Marcus and Patricia did the same with theirs. For a moment, there was only the sound of paper tearing. They each stood there, reading. I watched their faces. Chloe went first. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving a waxy pallor. Her lips, usually set in a confident line, parted slightly. Her eyes scanned the lines of the letter once, then twice, as if the words were in a language she couldn't comprehend. Her hand, holding the paper, began to tremble. Patricia's reaction was different. Her face flushed a deep, mottled red. Her eyes narrowed, then widened in outrage. She finished reading and her head snapped up, staring at the door as if she could see through it to me. "How dare she?" I saw her mouth form the words, though no sound came through the glass. Marcus was the slowest. He read methodically, his brow furrowed. Then his head jerked up, looking from the letter to Chloe, to Patricia, then back to the letter. His expression was one of pure, uncomprehending shock. It was the look of a man who had been sleepwalking and had just been plunged into ice water. Chloe made the first sound, a sharp, choked gasp. She took a step back, her heel catching on the edge of the porch step. She stumbled, catching herself on the railing. The letter fluttered in her grip. Patricia found her voice. "Bernice!" she shouted, hammering her fist on the door. The solid wood made a dull, thudding sound. "Bernice, open this door. This is outrageous. You can't do this. We're family." Marcus was just staring at Chloe. "What is this?" he asked, his voice low and strained. He held up his letter. "What is she talking about? What conversation?" Chloe couldn't answer. She was shaking her head, her eyes wild. Patricia kept pounding. "You senile old woman. You're confused. You've misunderstood everything. Open this door and we can talk about this." I remained in my chair, perfectly still. I watched Patricia's performance of wounded fury. I watched Marcus's dawning, horrifying comprehension as he looked from his wife's guilty collapse to his mother-in-law's vicious anger. I watched Chloe slide down to sit on the top step, her face in her hands, the letter crumpled in her lap. After several minutes of shouting and pounding, Patricia stopped, breathing heavily. She turned on Marcus. "Do something, call her, make her see reason." Marcus, his face ashen, slowly pulled out his phone. He dialed. I heard my own phone, upstairs in my bedroom, begin to ring. It rang and rang. I had set it to silent, but the screen would be lighting up with his name. He called 3 times in succession. Each time it rang out. He lowered the phone. "She's not answering." "She's in there, I know she is," Patricia screeched. She turned back to the door. "You'll regret this, Bernice. We'll see what a judge has to say. You're not in your right mind." Her threat was empty, and I think she knew it. The letter had mentioned my attorney. It had mentioned the updated legal documents. It had quoted her own words back to her. Finally, it was Marcus who moved. He bent and picked up the box. He looked at Chloe, still huddled on the step. "Get up," he said, his voice hollow. "We're leaving." "We can't just leave," Patricia protested. "What would you suggest?" Marcus snapped, a flash of something, anger, shame breaking through his shock. "We stand here all night. She's made herself clear." He looked at the door one last time, his eyes complex with pain and confusion. Then he turned and walked toward the car, carrying the box. Chloe, weeping openly now, pushed herself up and stumbled after him. Patricia stood alone on the porch for another minute, her fists clenched. She glared at the door with pure, impotent hatred. Then, with a final, furious huff, she turned and followed them. I watched their car reverse out of my driveway. It paused at the end of the street, as if the driver was uncertain which way to turn, and then it slowly disappeared from view. The porch was empty. The 3 envelopes were gone, taken with them. Only the ghost of their presence remained. I stayed at the window until the evening shadows began to lengthen across the lawn. The execution was complete. The sentence had been delivered. All that remained was the reckoning. The silence after their car left was absolute. I remained at the window until the streetlights flickered on. Then I went downstairs. I made a cup of tea and carried it to the living room. I sat in my usual armchair. I did not turn on the television. I waited. I knew the call would come. The initial shock would wear off, and Marcus would be left alone with the wreckage. He would need to speak to the source of the earthquake. My phone, which I had retrieved from the bedroom, rang at 8:17 p.m. His name flashed on the screen. I let it ring 3 times. I set my tea down. I answered. "Mom." His voice was ragged, broken. A single word carried a world of pain. Marcus. I read the letter. I've read it 10 times. She's hysterical. Patricia is ranting. What is happening? He was breathless, like a man who had been running. The letter is what is happening, I said, my tone even. It explains what I heard and the consequences I have enacted. That conversation, Mom, you have to believe me, I never knew. I never heard them talk like that. About a facility, about taking the house, I would never allow that. His voice cracked. You did allow it, I said, the words clean and sharp. You allowed the climate that made them think it was acceptable. You dismissed my concerns about the necklace. You told me I was being sensitive when they rearranged my home. You were not my protector, Marcus. You were their conduit. Your inattention was their permission. There was a long silence on the other end. I heard a choked sob. Oh, God, you're right. I wasn't paying attention. I just wanted peace. I wanted everyone to get along. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of justice. There was no justice for me in your version of peace, only a slow, polite usurpation. Chloe admitted it, he whispered, the horror clear in his voice. After we left in the car, she finally stopped crying and just admitted it. She said it was just talk, planning for the future, that they never meant to hurt you. But she didn't deny it. She didn't deny any of the words in your letter. Because she couldn't, I said. They were her words. What do I do? The question was a plea stripped bare. That is not my problem to solve, I said. My actions are complete. My home is secure. My life is my own again. Your life, your marriage, is your own problem. Do you hate me? The question was small, terrified. I considered it. No, I do not hate you. I am profoundly disappointed in you. The betrayal by them was calculated. Yours was casual. In some ways, that is worse. He was crying openly now. I listened to it. I felt a distant ache, the ghost of the pain his choices had caused, but I did not soften. Is there any way back from this? For me, I can't believe this is it. I can't lose you, Mom. This was the moment Rhodes had prepared me for. The conditional crack. It had to be on my terms, and it could not include them. The path for you is separate from the path for them, I said, each word measured. Chloe and Patricia are permanently removed from my life. That is non-negotiable. If you wish to have a relationship with me in the future, it will be a relationship between two adults. It will require time. A great deal of time. It will require you to enter individual therapy to understand why you were so willing to ignore the manipulation happening in your own family. And it will require you to establish and maintain firm, independent boundaries with your wife and her mother regarding me and my assets. You will not speak for me. You will not update them on my life. You will not serve as a messenger. I will be a subject that is closed to them forever. And if I do those things, he asked, a thread of desperate hope in his voice, then perhaps in a year or more we might have coffee in a public place. We might begin to talk. It will never be what it was. The trust that was broken cannot be unbroken. But it could be something new, something with clearer eyes. And if Chloe doesn't agree to those terms? Then you have a decision to make, I said, my voice final. Your marriage is your concern. My presence in your life or absence from it is mine. The two are now separate. I have made my choice. Now you must make yours. There was another long silence. I could hear him struggling to breathe evenly. I understand, he said finally, the words heavy with a new and terrible adulthood. I don't agree with all of it, but I understand your position. I'll do what you've asked. I'll find a therapist. Good. Mom, I am so sorry. More sorry than I can ever say. I know you are, I said. The anger was gone, leaving only a cool, vast certainty. Your apology is noted, but sorry does not rebuild trust. Actions do. I will not contact you. When and if you have done the work and you wish to attempt that coffee, you may call me. Not before. Goodbye, Marcus. I ended the call. I placed the phone on the side table. I picked up my tea. It was still warm. I took a sip. The reckoning was over. I had not forgiven him. I had given him a map, but I had not promised the destination. I had placed the burden of repair squarely on his shoulders where it belonged. The cord that had bound me to his poor choices was cut. He was in free fall, and for the first time, he knew it. I felt no triumph, only a deep, resonant quiet. The storm had passed, the house was still. My hands were steady around the cup. The next move was his or not. It no longer mattered to my peace. That was the final, most powerful part of the reclamation. Their turmoil was now their own. I was free of it. The morning after the phone call dawned clear and quiet. I slept through the night, a deep, dreamless sleep I had not experienced in months. When I awoke, the first thing I noticed was the silence. It was not an empty silence, but a full one. It was the sound of no expectations, no impending visits, no whispered threats hanging in the air. It was my silence. I rose and made my bed. I dressed in old, comfortable clothes meant for gardening. I went downstairs. The kitchen was spotless from my cleaning the night before. The counters were clear. The sink was empty. Sunlight streamed through the window over the sink, falling in a bright rectangle on the floor. I filled the kettle and set it on the stove. I took a single cup and saucer from the cabinet. While the water heated, I walked to the front door. I unlocked it and stepped onto the porch. The morning air was cool and fresh. The box was gone. There were no scuff marks, no lingering signs of their collapse. I looked at the lawn, at the flower beds lining the walkway. Everything was just as I had left it. Everything was just as it should be. I went back inside as the kettle began to whistle. I poured the boiling water over the tea bag in my cup. I carried it to the small kitchen table, the one where Charles and I used to have breakfast. I sat down. I did not turn on the radio. I listened to the house, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant tick of the hall clock, the sound of my own breath. I drank my tea. I thought of nothing in particular. My mind was not racing with plans or parsing memories for evidence. It was still. The work was done. After breakfast, I went into the garden. It was late in the season, but the chrysanthemums were bold and bright, and the autumn sedum was starting to turn a rich bronze. I took my shears and a basket. I deadheaded the spent blooms. I checked the leaves for pests. I pulled a few weeds that had dared to emerge in the moist soil. The earth was cool and damp under my fingers. This was my domain. I had planted every shrub, divided every perennial. The connection was physical and real. It could not be transferred by a signature on a deed. It was earned by time and attention. As I worked, Mrs. Henderson from 2 doors down walked past with her small dog. She waved. "Morning, Bernie, garden's looking lovely." I stood up, brushing the soil from my knees. "Good morning, Alina, thank you." "Quiet over here lately," she remarked, not unkindly. It was a simple observation. "Yes," I said, "it is, just how I like it." She smiled and continued on her walk. There was no subtext in her words, no hidden agenda. It was a neighborly exchange. It felt normal. It felt peaceful. I went back inside at midday. I made a simple lunch, a sandwich and an apple. I ate it at the kitchen table, reading a library book I had been meaning to finish. The story was engaging, and for an hour I was lost in another world. The ability to be absorbed in something so trivial felt like a luxury. In the afternoon, I did some light housekeeping. I dusted the living room shelves. I vacuumed the carpets. There was no need to prepare for guests, to stage my home for appraisal. I was cleaning for myself, for the pleasure of order and cleanliness. Later, I sat in the living room armchair. The house was quiet around me. I let myself think about the past week, not with anger or hurt, but with a distant clarity. The woman who had frozen in the hallway, shattered by a whisper, seemed like someone from a long time ago. She had been necessary. Her pain had been the fuel, but she was gone. The woman in the chair now was someone else. Someone who had listened, planned, and acted. Someone who had drawn a line in the sand of her own life and defended it. I did not wonder what Chloe or Patricia were doing. Their lives were now a separate channel, muted. I did not agonize over Marcus's choice. I had given him a path. The walking of it was his responsibility. My part was over. As evening approached, I felt a gentle fatigue, the good kind that comes from a day spent in simple, purposeful activity. I returned to the kitchen. I took out a single plate, a single bowl. I warmed some soup. I ate my dinner watching the sky turn from blue to indigo through the window. I washed my dish and bowl. I put them away. The kitchen was once again pristine, a serene and functional space. I took one last look around my home before turning out the lights. Everything was in its place. The peace was not just an absence of noise, it was a presence. It filled the rooms, solid and real. I climbed the stairs. I went through my evening routine. I brushed my teeth. I washed my face. I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The eyes that looked back were calm. The face was my own, familiar and strong. I turned off the light. In my bedroom, I opened the window a crack to let in the cool night air. I got into bed. The sheets were clean and smooth. I lay there in the dark, listening to the faint sounds of the night, a distant car, the rustle of leaves in the breeze. There was no triumph in my heart, no vengeful glee. There was only a profound and weary satisfaction. The battle was over. The fortress was secure. The rest of my life was mine again, to spend in quiet mornings in my garden with my books, in the beautiful, ordinary silence I had fought to reclaim. I closed my eyes. Sleep came easily, and it was deep, and it was mine.